What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. Today, I have a very special guest, one who I dropped the ball on and was still kind enough to come back. Michael Wann, Susquehanna Alchemy. Dude, thank you for being so understanding and welcome.
Thank you for having me, brother. That was funny because it's like it was perfect. Like sometimes you schedule something and then like at the time you schedule it, like that's awesome. I can't wait to do it. And then it's like maybe a half an hour beforehand. You're like, you know what? I'd rather not do this. But you suck it up. You suck it up. You're like, you know what? Because my word is my bond, and I said I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it. And then sometimes you get I think some people call it grace. You send me an email and you're like, I totally forgot about it. And that was a sense of relief for me. And so played with me a little bit. I'm like, do you remember what I told you?
You said you mean your joke, taking a vow of silence?
Like I told you, but I played it straight. Like you had no idea.
No, I had no idea.
All through text. There's no sort of innuendo or texture in the communication. So I'm like, you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about this. Can we please reschedule for next week? And I write back and I'm like, tomorrow I start a 90-day silence retreat. So we're going to have to wait and schedule until midsummer. And you're like, I suppose that's my punishment for being. And I'm like, I'm making it up, brother. Of course. I didn't want to do it anyway. But today I do. Today I am awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
It's so fun. Well, dude, see, you're a real spiritual guy. So I was like, well, that sounds insane to me, but maybe that's down to him, dude. Maybe that's what he's about.
So that's the best thing. If you can get the jokes when they're really close to home, that's what sells it. If it was something that, it's just funny because what we're doing is we're pointing out, and this is just how we work. There's nothing wrong with it, but we make all these assumptions. And if you're good at picking out where people's assumptions are, and you can play with it, and if you could do it with a soft enough touch. Yeah. Where it doesn't feel offensive, I think that's the greatest thing. I love when that's done to me. There's nothing I love more to catch myself in that, and then there's nothing I love more than just playing with other people with whatever assumptions they may make.
Dude, you got a great disposition, Michael. Wow. So I know you've been on Tinfoil, you've been on all the big shows, but just in case someone hasn't, can you give a little background about what you work on, what your research is, that kind of thing?
All right. So maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was my second podcast.
Okay.
It was my second podcast ever. And it was the Higher Side Chats. And the Higher Side Chats is a pretty big platform.
Huge. Yeah. Huge.
And that was my first introduction. And what I introduced was something which I now call the Susquehanna mystery. And it was this really, really interesting piece of research where there's the oldest river on the planet who no one has ever heard of unless you live in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, New York. And it just so happens to be the birthplace of all of these firsts that are really important in our reality right now. And it's got all these markings that are in plain sight. Look at how this is laid out and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do about this? It's and I laid that out, and I can weave a nice story. I would say that the ability to weave a story sometimes is better than the story itself. You can see that with like Hollywood or something that is that's a truth. Humans love stories.
Absolutely.
And so always storytellers. And so I play a little bit of that role. So my introduction was that, and it was a synchromystic, spiritually implied conspiracy mystery, which was very, very tangible, and it was relatable because you could go and check everything. You're like, this makes sense, but there's still enough mystery where it's there's not a conclusion. And so that, and the last thing was, I was intimately tied into the story because I discovered this research. The Susquehanna mystery began with me decoding the John Smith map of Virginia, which is tied to Jamestown. And when I did that, there was a secret location, and that secret location just happened to be where I was living. So, and like the secret location was so demonstratable. Like I'm like, it's not just me like walking into a bunch of trees. I'm like, yes, right here is a portal to the Pleiades. And if you get in the fifth dimension, like, no, I'm like, I'm going to point it out on a map, and you'll be like, yeah, brother, there's something freaky going on right there. And I was living there. So like that became part of like what I would say my like the texture
Okay.
of what I do, of telling these stories, which are some of them are a little bit more conspiracy ghost stories than others. Like, I'm not saying they're not real. I'm just saying, like, look at all of this.
Right.
Look at this. What's going on? And so, and then that's become more and more interwoven with, you know, my story. And there are a handful of other topics which I like to talk about. I like to talk about the nature of reality. I like to talk about like this time, a lot of cultural analysis, all of that sort of stuff. And, you know, my life kind of has some weird stuff going on, and it's like it's partly entertainment, but the entertainment is part of the experience of like, we got some crazy stuff going on right now collectively.
Well, so you brought up it like the nature of reality. What do you mean, like the nature of reality when you say that?
Okay, great question. So in a general sense, like I'll frame it up this way. So we've got like what I'm going to call baseline reality.
Okay.
You could call it God's reality. It is the natural world, but before it's named. So imagine like you're in the natural world, but you're not saying, oh, that's a tree and that's a rhinoceros and this is a human and those are clouds and I'm breathing in. Like before you get to that, like if you can find that space, like it's not named, but it's the most real thing we have, but I don't know what, like that's baseline reality.
Okay.
We've got like what I'll call matrix reality, which encompasses everything as soon as we start telling stories. Because as soon as you start telling a story, and it doesn't mean the story is not an accurate description. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But you're moving away from that reality. Those are two distinct levels of reality. Okay.
Right.
And then that baseline reality that exists somewhere. Like there's more than just like, you know, the going outside and seeing some streams and mountains, you know, there's more than that. And I call that the greater reality. And I'm okay not defining it, recognizing it exists and recognizing that I exist within it. And there's a harmonious thing, but my real purpose is like, for me, is the baseline reality. And so when I talk about the nature of reality, it's a way of interacting with this experience, which we're calling life, you know, with a very, very curious, inquisitive perspective, with a strong understanding that what we're experiencing is all originating inside, and being able, for me in particular, like to be as harmonious with this baseline reality as possible. I see that as much of a skill than anything else. Like that is part of the discovery practice of moving away from the matrix reality. And so when I talk about the nature of reality, like it's that. It's like, you know, what are these practices, and like just discussing it, and like this is my logic why I think this is important. Not to say that I can't be wrong, but at least I know where I'm coming from. Like this is where I stand on belief. This is where I stand on like I can observable truth, and this is why I do that. So to me, I think that's a big part of a lot of these things I like to play with. You know, I use that word play of areas of research or storytelling and so forth.
Interesting, dude. Man, your brain works a different way than mine. First, just the ability to that you went and like we all have this dream in the conspiracy world to be like the first to find something, right? Or like, and sometimes that drives people to make crazy claims and things like that. But that must have been so amazing to like create your own research, right? That must have been like a wild feeling, dude. Like you should be very proud of that, because very few of like, I don't have my own work. You know what I mean?
So Thank you for saying that.
No, but seriously, I'm not just blowing smoke.
And we could go into that a little bit, because you're pointing at something which I think is also part of what the story I like to tell. And it's part of what I do is I have a lot of transparency. Like I just like say, like, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And the idea of being able to like learn as I go and express what that is that's a big part. So where I'm going with all this is, we're talking about that feeling. You're like, oh wow, like to actually go and do that. But the truth of the matter is this is what I've discovered, and I think about this a lot with like athletes. And I think this, and I'm only using athletes because it's very obvious. And I think this is true for pretty much all of us, but it's very obvious. Like if you've ever met someone who's like unusually strong or unusually fast.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're like, and let's say if you're younger, like before you get old enough where you think like you know what it's about, and you go up to them and you're like, how do you do it? How do you run so fast? Like, how can you lift things? And they look at you and they're like, bro, how do you run so slow? Like, I don't understand. Like, I just go and I move my feet and this is what happens. Right. This is what and who I am. And so in a way, like I would say that would be true with the research. Like that felt really right to me. It wasn't a goal. Like I've always been curious. I happen to think that I've always brought out like really, really interesting things. What is true is it was the first time it was recognized outside of my own head. But at the same time, so it felt like no big deal. But then at the same time, there's a recognition that, maybe it should have. Like, why didn't it? And so when that was part of this whole sort of experience, and it almost went full circle. And I think that we can work it into tonight's conversation is like what we're talking about right now is what we're talking about right now is really the biggest driving force in where I am right now. And so well, I'll fill in those details in a moment, but I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question or reflect back.
No, that's continue because my question is going to bring us way off the circle, buddy. So let's continue with on the path we're traveling.
All right. So when I began with the Susquehanna mystery, and this is 2016, maybe 2017. Okay. I don't know. Like time, I don't know.
Right.
So, but it was a handful of years before like we had the transition into where we are now in reality. So I started doing all of this research and seeing all of these things, and I would talk to it about people. I would speak about the topic to people who were in my immediate reality, friends, family, people around the neighborhood, and everyone's just looking at me like I'm nuts. And they're like, just shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up, they would say. And I'm like, all right. And then like I said, like I put together a really nice package. The reason why Greg at the Higher Side Chats, except because he probably, I mean, even back then would receive, I'm imagining like lots and lots and lots of like, can I come on your show, dude? Yeah. Like I totally found something in my basement and it's not. And so he has to sift through a whole bunch of stuff, which he doesn't want to sift through. Yes. But he's also like, he's a man of the people, all this sort of thing. And so I put together, in my opinion, like a pretty phenomenal package. Like I made a strong argument, and he responds to me. He's like, dude, I'd love to have you on my show. And so that's where it begins. And so like that began, and I started having like a little bit of I don't want to say redemption, but like the people in the neighborhood who thought I was nuts, I could like, were at least like, oh, well, he went on the Higher Side Chats if they even knew what it was. So that's like 5 years ago. And that has turned into a whole bunch of other things. I've talked about a whole bunch of other stories, but that's always where it began. So let's go back to about 6 months ago. Let's even go back to a year ago. I started moving towards my 50th birthday. I turned 50 in December.
Wow.
And and like something weird started happening to me internally. Like I'm feeling something. I'm like I carried a zest for life, a certain energy, a certain quality, which I didn't even realize I did until I started noticing that was not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I'm like, I could be introspective. I'm like, what is this? What am I experiencing? And like, there wasn't really like anything like obvious, because there's a lot of really, really good things happening in my life. I'm like, well, maybe it's like turning 50. Like maybe that's a thing. Like I've never been a number guy, but I'm like, this is kind of a big number, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, maybe it's that. Maybe this is what it feels like. This is what those movies are about. And I also knew that I was having there was an eclipse on my birthday, and I talk a lot about the natural world and looking at the natural world in terms of like patterns and occurrences and finding that line between meaning without like interpretation.
Okay.
Right. And so I was like, okay, like it's a solar eclipse on my birthday. I'm turning 50. I'm like, man. 3 days before my birthday, I get an invitation from these Freemasons, and they're like, we want you to go, and we want to invite you. We love your research, and we want you to come in and present to us on our quarterly meeting.
No way.
And like this whole thing began. And I'm like, let's talk about, like you mentioned validation. Like, this story began with me, like, not having validation,
right.
And like all this sort of stuff. And if you look at the whole trajectory of this journey, like beginning with this, it's a very Freemasonic story, the Susquehanna mystery. There are a lot of elements which point to Freemasonry, and I talk about it like I've got like some degree of understanding. But like, I know is what anyone else knows who has not a member. Right. And then I get invited. I'm like, what, by them to teach them about what I'm saying about them? It's like there's real, and that would ultimately be on a certain level of validation, but it didn't. It really wasn't. Like I was in, like there was something not like fulfilling. Like I was missing something. So a couple of weeks goes by. I get that invitation late November, and a couple of weeks goes by, and I'm in January. It's in January, and like one day I wake up and I feel agitated, and I go and I reread this invitation, and I'm looking at it closely, and I'm like, holy crackers. The date of the presentation, and it was already pre-planned. Like I was told, this is the date, this is the location, this is the time. It wasn't like, hey, let's go figure this out. What works for you, dude? It was all pre-planned. It was on the anniversary of the death of Kobe Bryant. And the reason why that's significant is because right before the whole big like fantasy game that changed the world that hit on the Ides of March 2019, or was it 2020? I don't even remember anymore. The years are so strange. That came out on February 15th. That's when Donald Trump said, this is a national emergency and we're going to shut everything down. On February 28th, the Higher Side Chats dropped one of my episodes, an episode which I thought was fantastic. And what I did was I laid out this really, really interesting story about Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash death, which happened just a couple weeks earlier. And I tied it to this other helicopter crash tragedy that happened over Kobe Bryant's high school.
Damn.
And that was of John Hines of the Heinz Ketchup Fortune.
Interesting.
Family. Number 57. I talked all about number 57 and about what that was. And I was living in like a house. I just moved in a house, number 57. Like I was doing like my thing. And I get this letter. And the day I received it and the day to Kobe's death was exactly 57 days.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, all right. And then the location of the meeting. This is where it just gets even better. The location of the meeting. So Kobe Bryant, where did he go? And he played his high school ball. And he was known as the best high school basketball player of all time.
I know this sports at Lower Marion.
In Lower Marion. So where do you think our meeting was? Because these were a bunch of Freemasons from the Philadelphia area, and we were meeting like, I don't know, like not exactly in Lower Merion, but
Yeah.
we were about up 3 miles away.
Okay.
Like we're like, if you were going to think about like in the big picture of the United States, and you're like, oh no, you're 3 miles away from the location of the birth date and all of this, like that's kind of a bullseye.
No,
and then
yeah.
a couple other things. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, what do you want to do? What are you going to do with this, Mike? I'm like, do you really think they're gonna ritualistically sacrifice you? Do you think this is gonna happen, Mike? And but then there's part of me which was like, I'm ready for an adventure. Like there's a part of me which was like, there's something that's not working. There's, I was feeling that. I was describing that feeling. And I was like, so I sat with it. I talked about it a lot for about 10 days.
Okay.
And then I was like, I'm going to go and give the presentation. I talked to this one guy. This guy's like, I can get you out of Dodge. They're going to take you out. They're going to take you out. This is undoubtedly a threat. You're going to be ritualistically sacrificed. There are going to be shows about you like there are about Cappy. They're going to be like, what happened to him? And they're like, I'm going to take you and we're going to get you underground. I've got my own underground bunker. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go out. Like, I actually would rather go out like Cappy than that. Like, that was what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. So it's like, I don't think anything's going to happen. I go to the presentation and I'm like, if anything happens, it's like, I'm going to go out on my feet. I'm going to go out on my feet.
All right.
So anyway, so I go, it was a wonderful night. I give them the presentation they want. And then I kind of like flip the script and I'm like, hey, this email, look at this, 57, blah, blah, blah. You guys are the bad guys. Are you going to do bad things? They're like, maybe, And then I was like, too bad. You can't do nothing. This for me. And I bowed and I said, that was my initiation. And I get in the car and I go home. I'm like, I wonder what I was just initiated into. Like, that was kind of how I framed up the story.
Okay.
So like the next day, and I don't want to get into the gory details, but like some things in my personal life just imploded. And out of nowhere, I had to get out of my house. And I did not know where I was going to go because I had to get out real fast. And I found myself in the most unusual circumstances. And there was someone who I didn't really know very well. I had done a session for him. And I knew he had something to do with real estate. I didn't really know much.
Okay.
So I call him up. I'm like, hey, Scotty, this is Uncle Mike. Remember we did a thing together a while ago? He's like, yeah, I remember. I'm like, I'm in a pinch. Like I literally felt like I was in a Joe Pesci movie. I'm like, I'm in a pinch. And he's like, don't worry, Uncle Mike. I got the whole thing covered for you. I got a house. It's fully furnished. It's going to be great. You just come on down. I'm waiting for you. And I'm like, all right, where is it? He's like, it's in Baltimore. I mean, he's in Baltimore. I'm like, huh. Because first off, like they have painted when you say whoever they is, the they who does the thing, they painted a picture of Baltimore, and they've created a place in Baltimore of a collapsed major city in North America. And I've got some personal history to Baltimore, and so all these negative connotations, I'm like, I'm gonna go know Baltimore. But I had no other options.
Yeah.
This option was right in front of me. So I can recognize a difference between my desire or my want or my like, I don't want to do something. And I can recognize the difference between that and then what needs to be done. And often what needs to be done, at least for me, my own compass of navigating life is what life presents to you. Like there's no misinterpretation. Like so I'm like, I didn't want to go to Baltimore, but I knew that was what I needed to do. Okay. And I'm driving down, and Scotty's telling me, he's like, oh yeah. There's one more thing I forgot to tell you. There's one more thing. It's just a small little thing. I'm like, what's that small little thing? He's like, we got power. We definitely have power. Like we could turn on the lights. And I'm like, okay. He's like, but there's no heat. This is the end of January, mind you.
Right.
And he's like, there's no heat in the house. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, does it get cold? He's like, no. Like when the sun comes up, we like open the windows and the sun comes in. Oh, it's just like, it's fine. I'm like, okay. And then I arrived at the house. The house is So it's like you kind of drive through, and I'm like, where am I going? Where am I going? Where am I going? And you find this house. And in some ways, like, Baltimore, it deserved its reputation. There's a lot of trash. Like it's that's part of the way which the city infrastructure collapse has to do with the trash. And we're driving through there, and it's like you have that feeling. I'm very sensitive to my surroundings, and I walk around the side. I walk around the side of the house, and the house is sitting on top of a ridge line. And the ridge line drops 150 feet in a pretty steep, not a cliff, but it's a steep decline. And it goes down to body of water, a creek, a stream, a small river, probably about 40 feet in width across, like a sizable 150 feet below. And there are all of these decks built into the side of the house. Like layered decks going down to take advantage of this spectacular view. And he shows me that. I'm like, wow. He's like, yeah. I meant to tell you, there's this amazing view. And there's one other thing. He's like, because we don't have heat and because it's so cold, we don't want the pipes to freeze. So we turn the water off so the pipes don't freeze. So I'm like, I don't have water. He's like, well, it's okay. It's okay because we capture. So, all right. So here we are on May 4th. I moved in on February 2nd. I'm just about 100 days, and I'm going to be moving out.
Wow.
I'm going to be moving out in a week. This 100 days has been everything which you could friggin' imagine. In terms of like highs and lows and learnings and growths and all of it, and insights and inner work and outer work and it's been wild. And that brings us to where we are right now.
Are you done? I didn't know if it was like
I'm giving you an opportunity to say something.
Oh no, I didn't know if you were building suspense. I was like, where's he going to go next with this?
So that's where we are now. I brought you up to speed. So now you have an opportunity to be like, okay, now let me go ask some questions.
Perfect. Well, so I was with because I saw on your Instagram a lot talking about ball consciousness, and so I guess what did you talk? What was your presentation to the Freemasons? And we'll start with that. What was the presentation that you gave?
The Freemasons just wanted to learn about the Susquehanna mystery.
Okay. All right.
And so particularly the Rosicrucian and the Freemasonic elements to it, and all of the things which are amazingly evident and Freemasonic in nature, like the signature. And no one has ever talked about it, but other than me. I've not written a book, so there's no books. And I give a pretty good presentations. I've got great visuals, and so I gave them that.
Interesting. Okay, that I just was interested in if there was anything different. So then, ball consciousness. So what
ball consciousness?
Well, yeah. What is ball consciousness?
So first off, ball consciousness is a name of something, which if we don't talk about it, if we don't it exists. But when we name it, and this is where we begin to recognize like lines, like where we are on a line. Do we cross over a line? We always have these lines, and to be able to recognize where you are. So what I'm saying is, when you name something that hasn't been named, like you just created a line. And what a lot of people do, and it's kind of it's ironic in the fact, like, this is part of like what ball consciousness is once something is named, it is experienced, it is thought of from the individual as being something. Like, oh, it's named, so it's a thing. It's like, that's what I mean when I said like baseline reality. It is the natural world before you name it. Like the white puffy thing, which you see in the sky when the bright like yellow ball or light is out because it looks like a circle. We call it a cloud, and you can't help If you were brought up in this system, you can't help to be brought up in the system. When you see it, you're like, oh, well, you know, there's like this thing and like water, and somehow like it turns invisible and floats up to the sky, and then it forms a cloud, and then it rains again. Like, I'm not really certain how it works, but I know it works. And but that, because that's been named. Someone, when they told that to you, when you learned that story in science class, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying I don't know if it's true. I'm just saying that's what I know for fact is that's what I was taught. And so what happens is this is one of those lines. What I just said is I defined a line. It's like, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's false, but I do know it is taught. That's the most true thing you can say about a cloud. Maybe someone who's got scientific equipment could say something a little bit more boldly than what I said. And they'll be like, well, actually, you can go do this and this. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. But I know where I am with my own relationship with this information. That is the thing with naming. Like, you know, I just went into a great deal of detail to describe something which we all kind of like know, but we've never like thought so much of it. And that's the whole thing. This goes back to like what we talked about in the beginning, like that joke I played on you is like, I bumped up against one of your assumptions because I knew you felt guilty. I knew you felt like, oh, wow, like, and you reached out, you were like very like gracious, and I knew like you wanted to interview me, and I knew you were like, oh, I set this up, and now I do this. Like, I know all that, and I know you got a picture in your mind of whatever you think I am, so I'm like, I'm going to go play with it. But that's ball consciousness to a degree, or at least that's the modus operandi for how ball consciousness begins to take root. And so because we don't realize like all of this stuff, and I know I haven't defined what ball consciousness is yet, but all of this stuff that we just assume is real, we've never really questioned. And because of that, we have acted and lived our lives in silent compliance with like, this is just the way life is. This is just the way it is. Like, what else would it be? Think about it. Okay, so ball consciousness. There's a couple ways of looking at it. We could go down a conspiratorial element. We could go in a higher-minded element also. But ball consciousness is this. It is the fundamental internal understanding of reality that, you know, it is, you're in the predator-prey relationship. Like everything that implies with that, with like competition and scarcity and like, you know, you got to do this to survive. And like your survival is based upon someone else's doom. Like, yeah, there's a thing. And when that as a general, like on the deepest level, on the archetypical level is in the consciousness of the individual, then everything is built up upon that. Everything is built up upon that. So that's what I meant. Like you look at the cloud and you can't help but like think about like, oh, look, that's like, you know, I'm not thinking about it consciously, but like, yeah, it looks like it does like a dog. And like, oh, imagine like those other people in another time who didn't have science. They probably thought it was something silly. Yeah. You know, but it's like, no, you've literally limited what you think reality is. So ball consciousness, it works that way in the fact that we've been so conditioned. And there's an element of truth to it, but we've been so conditioned to see ourselves and how we live in this competitive way with everything. Then that is the essence of ball consciousness. Now, the opposite or the comparison to it would be like, well, okay, well, what else is there? There is what I would say would be Edenic consciousness. And it is the opposite of that. And that would be like, there is like literally everything can be supported just by being. And that there's nothing, you don't have to take from something else in order for your survival. In fact, just being you being you without taking from something else, you're going to be supported. And you're like, well, where's the truth in that in reality? I'm like, well, look at a friggin' tree. Like you were told that a 400-pound lion has to weigh 400 pounds. That's why it's got to eat 120 pounds of gazelle a day. Because of mass. Because it is 400 pounds and needs 120 pounds. Like, all right, you know, that makes sense. I got a better story. Right. Well, that tree, which is right in front of your house, is probably like 10 million pounds or 10 million pounds.
Right, whatever. Yeah, I got it.
Tons was the word I was looking for. What do you think created that mass? You know, this is much, much bigger than the lion. What do you think? Like, let's go back to the same science, the one which I was mocking, like what they were saying. Like, there's not a hole beneath the tree of like 10 million pounds of dirt. Like, it ate 10 million pounds of dirt, and through like the tree digestive process turned into wood. Like, somehow through what they tell us is like, this carbon oxygen exchange and like photosynthesis and blah, blah, blah. Like, the tree just gets all of this mass. And it actually provides for everything else in the ecosystem. Like, it gives housing, and like the leaves fall, and it gives nutrients, and like everything, like actually, like it kind of works really, really nicely. And so that is a demonstrable fact. Now, I'm not saying I'm a tree, but I'm saying I'm part of nature. And it's like, I'm not saying I'm a lion, but I'm also part of that. But we can begin to go and look at how the human being is different and how they're similar to all of these things. And the whole reason why, and I say, I've used this word in the beginning when I was talking about how I interact with these ideas, I use the word play. Like, I'm not trying to solve anything. Like, I can see things that are evidently out of harmony with reality. There shouldn't be trash on the street. Human beings should not live in trash. It just does not, like no depth, no sort of like metaphysical, like that's just the truth. That's just the truth. And so we know some things have to change. And so we have to be able to recognize that we are playing a part of it, and we're playing a part of it because we think it's normal. So we have to begin to go and look at things in a new way. But if we've always looked in a certain way, we don't even know it's a way because it hasn't been named. So when I talk about ball consciousness, when I talk about Edenic consciousness, I'm not like trying to solve something. I'm not trying to say like this is the answer. I'm like, look at these ideas, look at these boundaries, which we're always holding. We're always like, we think we don't have a blind spot, but if you recognize that there's a blind spot, you have to realize that you have no idea how big it is by definition.
Interesting. See, so for me, like, this is a great show because I've like branched away from this type of introspection. How do you like, does it, so like in my, obviously you've researched all like Blavatsky and all these like new age beliefs. I have a negative connotation when I reference them or when I read about them. And it's like, have you pushed like that concern away? Like, do you just pick do you understand what I'm asking? I know
exactly what you're saying. And in my opinion, from my experience, so I cannot move away from the factual truth that whatever this mystery is, like at a certain level, it's all one.
It's all what?
One. Like there's not like there's a certain level, like you can zoom out and zoom out and zoom out, and you can't necessarily get to it by looking at it, but like logically you can conclude that at some point, like it's all one, and it gets a little bit paradoxical because, well, what are you comparing it to? But I can't get away from that, and that's why I say like I don't need to define. Like the closer you get to that, like the more you can't see it, and so. If that is a foundational understanding of what's going on, you have to then look at everything that is in it as part of it. So there's that. But then there's recognizing like, all of like the truths in life and like, how do you navigate that? So when I look at a lot of the things, particularly like the Theosophists, the Blavatskys, I'll even say, do you know who James Shelby Downard is?
I don't think so. No,
he's a lesser known person, but he's kind of like the antithesis of those of those folks. Like I get it, and I can see like all of the things that are inversions of our culture and our belief system, inversion from a life affirmative and expansive expression on Earth. So Earth is always living and expanding, but there is part of it which is always dying. Like, so there's a truth to that. And so being able to kind of navigate what I think is the higher truth is the expansion. You know, I'm being metaphorical and literal when I'm talking about that. So recognizing these forces, like what, or like like whatever bad words we want to go and apply to the bad guys, like, yeah, but it's also part of it. And so if it's part of it, then to what point? Like we begin with like, well, it's part of it. Well, how do I know? Because it friggin' exists. And so from that, you can begin to like one of the big things, and this is what my opinion is like most of it's just all made up. Most of it's made up. And there's this thing that happens that when enough people believe something, it becomes something. Right?
I totally agree with that.
And that means like the original cause of that belief, could be completely fabricated, but then it becomes something of itself, something different. And it doesn't even matter that it was made up to begin with. It's now something else. Like that is a fundamental truth of our reality. And when you begin to actually understand and see, and you go through the practice of like, okay, these are the bad guys, but then they did this, but then they did that. And then you begin to realize that it is through that act of like discernment of like the bad guys that you realize like, oh, this is how the nature of this reality works. And so if they weren't there, then I just never would have had a need to go and learn that, because truth is invisible. Truth is invisible and just brings you back home. And so like to me, from my experience, so you go through this process, like particularly there are all of these different ways, I think, which people can go through this process. And it's ultimately about the nature of reality, or the nature of the experience of being human. I think that's a better way of saying it, because the nature of reality sounds like it's bigger than that. I'm just talking about being human, and how to be the best, like how to be human, is this recognition of how this works. And this conspiracy sort of like, and anything which has a boogeyman, and all of Baal consciousness is based upon boogeyman consciousness. You have to come to the point where what you're afraid of, you see, is not real. And in fact, actually, like there's someone or there's something that is conspiring for you, with you. Like there's a good guy behind this. This is not designed, like this is not neutral. Like you begin to see like there's more to this. And it's actually kind of fun, but like the reason why it's not fun is because you got to learn how to fall. You need to learn how to like trust, but you also have to learn how to hold your sail. Like there's a whole bunch of things. Which you learn, but like you realize that it's a lot like safer than you think, because it's not all of that other stuff. And so when we talk about the Blavatsky, and we talk about the bad guys, and we talk about the Freemasons, and we talk about like, and that's externalizing it, because at some point you're gonna have to internalize it and realize like, well, what is it inside that you're actually like projecting out there in these stories? Like as you begin to like realize like, you know, the nature, I mean, it's really, really true. It's like by understanding yourself and understanding your history and how you work and how the human being works and all of this sort of stuff, like you go through these processes and then you're like, oh, that's just kind of the nature of how this is. And then it's just like, what did I just go through? So Baal consciousness is a understanding this sickness of our society is both a healing and of what we've all been born into, but then also like this is how you move through it, and you realize like it's actually for your own, you know, as you learn not to be part of it, you learn like the opposite, which is the easiest thing in the world, and it is much, much, much more of an enjoyable experience. And my personal interest is like, I'm seeing this erupt everywhere right now, is like, how far does it go? How far can this go?
Interesting, dude. Well, I love you seem to be very in tune with all these things that I've definitely shut off. That, so this is like kind of, I don't know if this really relates, but so I have like I don't believe like in aliens. I believe that there's definitely like demons or whatever you want to call it out there, like bad things that have not your best interest at heart. Do you ever in your research feel like you're flirting with this line where you're like communicating with some, because you're very, it's from like talking to you and your Instagram, you seem like you're very close to that line of like energies and or whatever you want to call whatever you want. So, yeah.
So okay, so the quick answer is yes, yes. Like I've walked along the line, but then it comes to the question, like, well, what is this? You know, are these real? Are these like, you know, if someone never told you that there was something called a demon,
yeah,
you know, would you know what a demon is? Like, there could be this other thing which is even worse than a demon, which no one ever even told you about. You're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I had to worry about those motherfuckers. Right. And so like, okay. So that and I say that as a rhetorical question. I'm not saying there aren't demons. I'm just saying like, okay, we're pointing out some assumptions, but you are right. You are right. There's dangers, and the dangers from, this is why I use the word boogeyman and or scarecrows, or even the Wizard of Oz, because you begin to realize like a lot of it is not real. I told you that story with the Freemasons and the 57 and the where did that come from? Like, you know, imagine like if I would have really been, oh my God, they're going to kill me. I can't believe it. They're going to kill me and they're going to skin me alive and they're going to drink my blood and they're going to go on a lustful orgy on me. And I'm like, you know, I could have had that idea. And then I'm like, I'm disappearing in the middle of the night and never will they get me. You know, I mean, right. I guess that's a possibility. And then, like, you know, that's not even real, but it becomes real. And we realize that the nature of our reality is there are truths there. I can say for myself, you can't take anyone else's word when they're talking about stuff like this. It's like, you can't take someone else's word that this is how you ride a bike. If you've never ridden a bike, I'm like, you get on that thing, you just sit on it and you put your foot on that pedal and you put your other foot in that pedal and you just move it. Like, look how easy it is. And then like, okay. And you're like, you know, is that true or not? Like, you have to discover it. You have to learn how to ride a bike for yourself. So part of the things which I'm talking about and I share is like when you come face to face with like your own fears and you understand where they come from. And a lot of times what your fears are, and ball consciousness is all about fear. And I'm going to go back to what I think is the most important thing and maybe how it ties into myself. All fears are really, really simple. You know, we project these stories. Maybe those stories are right or maybe they're wrong, but it really doesn't matter. It's like the only thing that really matters is what we know and what we can experience. We could go deeper with what it means, I suppose, but like to just go and abstract about what may or may not be happening, like, you know, what is that? So we live in a ball consciousness system that's, you know, which in my opinion, like it teaches you how to move out of ball consciousness, but it is a controlled, all of the indication, all of the books and the markings and all of the things we can experience is like, yeah, this is being orchestrated and it's being done to people. It's being done to, like, literally, like it went like, oh yeah, there was you know, think about like the gaslighting of the culture from like Ukraine to like Roe versus Wade. Like, you know, just like as soon as like the people thought they could relax on one thing, like now they've got something. I didn't even know I had to worry about that. What else? So that's what I mean. So that's the fear. It is to never keep someone settled, and it's becoming worse and worse and worse because it's becoming faster and faster. And so that is a very, very, very basic. That is one of the most basic necessities and truths about being human. So let's even go from like the original, what we know from the original experience of being human. When you are inside your mother's womb, your first home, Okay. How you got there? I don't know. They say like there's a seed and this egg, and then somehow a person comes out, and both people really seem to like doing it. Like, it's like who comes up with this stuff? And then the person comes out. But that person who's growing in the stomach, everything is provided. Like literally everything is provided. And that is seemingly a truth. And the more we can realize that that's a truth, imagine being born and living in a realm, in a world, in a culture where like everything is provided. And then what is able to occur for that human being to be able to expand, grow, learn, do whatever the stuff it is that human beings want to do, if they never have to worry about like their basic needs being provided. Like that is one of the most like fundamental foundational qualities of being human, is feeling safe in our environment. And we have an entire culture which is built upon making you not feel safe and trying to hypnotize and remind you that you're never safe.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Up, so you're not safe, and I'm going to remind you constantly you're not safe because you're never at home. And here's the most basic. This is like one of the litmus tests. Like if you have to worry about where you're going to live, like if you got to, like maybe it's not a big worry. Maybe it's not a big worry, but you're like, okay, I know that my mortgage or my rent, that's covered. I don't have to worry about that. But then you're like, well, what if I lose my job? Okay, maybe I got 6 months worth of savings, okay, I'm going to be good for this. Like we come up with these things to like feel safe in our environment. I'm going to live in a house which is way beneath my means. Like all of these sort of things are like, okay, now I'm satisfied. Oh, I'm going to pay off my mortgage. I'm going to pay off my mortgage. And then all I got to do is pay my annual real estate taxes. Like you never relax in your home. It's impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is the nature of where we come from in this culture, is that you are never at home. You could be like, it could be more obvious and less obvious. What is the worst thing which we can call someone in our culture? We call them homeless. That's the worst thing which we like, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be homeless. In the 1940s, like people are like, oh, I want to be a hobo. Hobo life sounds great. I'm going to hop on the back of the truck, hop on the back of the train. There's nothing better. But like now, like, everything about being homeless has just been so conditioned that is the worst thing. At the same time, I don't know if you remember the TV shows like MTV Cribs.
Yeah.
Like we in our culture, and I love architecture, I love homes, but we put homes on a pedestal. Architectural Digest, Dwell magazine, like better homes and gardens, like that's a huge thing to remind everyone, like, oh, look how beautiful the home is, and this is where you feel safe and it's beautiful, and that's true. But it's also reminding you, like, you got to go and be in the system. You have to have money. You have to do this. You have to do that. And that's the only way you're going to get security. So the point and where I was going with all of this, with the home and the ball consciousness, is it is purposefully to keep us never satisfied or safe, truly safe of being at home. Like, let me go and throw this out, for example. Because you're like, well, give me an example, Mike, of where everyone's got a home. I'm like, I don't know. What if we like agreed in our culture that, we don't build houses made of shitty ass material, and we come up with like actually like these other ways of being able, however the Peruvians made the Machu Picchu, we figure that one out too. And we build houses, and guess what? They last for eternity. And we got more than enough. And you don't have to pay rent, like, and we take care of it because we realize like this is what it's about. And like, we need to have a place. And like, there's so many other ways in which human beings could collectively agree to live. But there are these assumptions like, oh, well, Mike, welcome to the real world. Like, you got to make money because if you don't pay your rent, you're not going to go and stay. Like, that's the truth. But it's only a truth within the system. And that the system is based upon reminding you that if you don't play by the system's rules, well, then so we're at a point right now where they're changing the rules of the system. They're moving it hardcore into ultimately this metaverse type reality or what have you. But we're at a point right now where it's quite obvious, like how much of this is bullshit. And now it takes courage to go and say, like, I know they're lying, but now I'm going to actually walk the walk, and I'm going to step out there, and I'm going to be like, I know that there's another way which we could live. I know that I'm not in competition with all of my brothers and sisters. We're all here. We're all like got here somehow, and we're all in the same boat. And everything
is your name Karl Marx, bro?
Well, I mean, this is what you have to do. Truth is truth is truth. If you hear a truth, what did I say which is not true?
No, I think that's all
right?
valid.
But
sure,
we also know Karl Marx has a certain flavor, right?
I was just joking.
But this is very, very important, because this goes to like the Theosophists. This goes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Even if it's like the bad guy, there is a truth in it. If you can extract, and that is part of it. And so that is part of the ball consciousness trickery, is the fact that it is so easy to lump something together and say, like, what, and it doesn't matter what side you are, like, because there's a side. You're like, well, some people are like, well, Karl Marx was a genius. And some people are like, well, Karl Marx is like,
yes,
that's
absolutely.
and so, but that's the game. But when you begin to see that and see truth, and truth is self-evident. Truth does not need someone to explain it to you. It is what you can just naturally deduce. Well, then, that is how we move out of it. And so that, to me, is the time we're in. That's why I talk about ball consciousness. So, and the reason why people resonate with it is because it makes sense to them, and then they bring it to their own understanding of reality, however they frame it up, because a truth is a truth is a truth.
No, I like what you said. I mean, dude, the world is so polarized now, and like I still like have that like associating bad with a person or whatever, but there are things that I try to remain like there is positives to it, like I'm just saying, like socialistic society, like there is too much separation between the haves and the have-nots, and et cetera. So, but they're so good at polarizing and putting you into a corner or camp.
So let me ask you this. So how do you feel about this statement? You will own nothing and like it.
Immediate reaction, I don't like it. Right.
Why don't you like it?
And that's a great question, because I know who created that saying. So I know what they push, what kind of agenda they're for. And so I associate that statement with them with bad.
So do you have do you like have a mortgage, or do you pay rent?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what's inside your residence? Like stuff?
Yeah. Stuff.
Yeah. All this stuff. So like, do you have to do things to bring in money?
Yes. Yeah.
If you did not have to worry about money, would you do the things that you're doing to bring in money? Would you spend your time doing it?
No.
Okay. And you're doing it so you can more or less pay for your apartment to keep your stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So do you think if you own nothing, you might be happy? I mean, I'm being silly here, but like, there's an element of truth to it. But you're absolutely right. Like, they're like, this is Klaus Schwab. We hate him. We hate him. Like, it's literally Dr. Evil. And they're like, and it's like, and everyone, whether you're getting upset, they've got so many things to get us upset about. And I think the best thing to do is turn away. But if you're looking at it, you can still go and see there's some real truth to it. And like, that's part of like the trickery. I kind of like, I like my stuff, but I think about it all the time. Like, I'm a very material guy. Like, I enjoy being material. Like, I know a lot of spiritual people are like, my spirit is trapped in this 3-dimensional, but I'm like, I kind of like having a body. Like I think it's fun. Like, I like being active in my body. I like exploring my body, like all the things my body can do. I also like beautiful things. I like things like which are artistic, and like I want to touch and textures. Like, I like stuff. Like, I'm not, when I say this, I'm not saying it from like this high and mighty sort of thing. Perspective. I say this from like, I think that I've been born into a system which has been mind fucking me from the beginning, and I'm just going to go and be as obvious and like try to find like what these lines are. And like, I'm not saying I want to get rid of all my stuff, but I recognize there's some truth to that, and looking at how does this system, which has me linked in, or all of us linked into it, how does it work? How does it work? What are the pins that hold it together? And, what happens if we took them out? What would it look like if it were something else?
I love it, dude. No, I think it's it's too much. Like, people need to be able to see these truths that you keep calling, and we would be a lot better off in the world if we could all take a step back and try and remove some of that emotion and say, well, what is true about this statement, or this side, this set of beliefs?
So this is what I think. I mean, this has been my experience, and you're absolutely right. So like, that's one of the things which we've been taught. We've been taught that, something needs like a lot of work to fix a major problem. Oh, it's going to be a lot of work. If we look at reality, if we look at material reality, if we look at baseline reality, if we look at God's reality, so it's so easy. So think about the first languages which people learn. For me, it was English. I'm assuming it was English for you. And probably if you're watching the show, maybe it is as well. You didn't learn that with flashcards. Like if you learned a second language, maybe in the 7th grade, maybe you had flashcards. You learned in like another language and you had to go. But your first language, like you didn't have to learn any of it. You didn't have flashcards. People didn't explain anything. The way the human being is designed is it is a natural self-learning mechanism. Like what it's around, particularly in those first 7 years, the first 3 years are even more influential. Like it becomes its reality. That's just the nature of how it works. That's real easy. Like it's not like, you got to go and learn anything. But that's not like the exception. That's the way reality works. So the best example would be what they told us about like the smog in Wuhan. Like, I don't even know if Wuhan exists. I'm not saying it doesn't, but like the only way I know is that I've seen it on the TV, and I know the TV's lied to me before. So that means I have to at least question everything. But nonetheless, they tell me this story. They told me the story that when they shut down Wuhan, when this all began, that the 50-year dense smog disappeared in 2 weeks. Yes. Self-cleaning, self-correcting. They told us when Chernobyl. So I remember this. I'm a man with a little bit of experience. And when the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown happened, like everyone was terrified. That's what everyone was terrified about in the 80s, was like nuclear radiation. Right. Like, yes. How worried are you of nuclear like power plant meltdowns?
Zero.
Exactly. Yeah. But there was a time everyone was.
Right.
Like,
and hairspray.
Still the same thing. Exactly. All of those reactors are still around, but now you're not supposed to worry about it. Now you worry about this because that's the game. So okay, so I don't even remember where I was going with the nuclear power plants and the worries. Oh, it was Chernobyl. Chernobyl. So Chernobyl, there are 3 main events where they really spooked everyone with the nuclear radiation. They're like, oh, Chernobyl happened. And in this footprint of, I don't know, like 1,000 miles, like it will be inhabitable. No life can exist for 10,000 years. For 10,000 years, no life can exist.
Right.
And like, that was like in the 80s, like that. And everyone was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. This happened in Chernobyl. What's going to happen in like Buenos Aires? And then like everyone's just ruminating. And so what happened? Nothing. In fact, there's always stories about like, oh, in Chernobyl, we're seeing fauna, which has not been seen on Earth in 10 billion years. It's like, and then you'll see like these documentaries. Like I saw this documentary once, and it's like this guy's like, I'm exploring back in Chernobyl, and I came across this man and his grandmother living in a trailer, and they're drinking vodka, and they're like, we've been living here. Everyone left, and we stayed here, and they made them like pancakes. Like it's self-correcting, whether anything happened in Chernobyl or not. But the point is, like, that was seemingly self-corrected. The reason why, like, people do this intermittent fasting is because it came to realize that when the body's not constantly digesting and it has a time to be at rest, like, guess what? All of these functionalities in your body kick into action, and it just takes care of all of these problems. Like, we live in a self-correcting world, in a self-correcting realm. So when we begin to think about these problems, it's like, I kind of trust like the nature of our reality, which is it's self-correcting. And how does it get self-correcting? Is you take a rest from it.
Interesting.
How do you take a rest? Like literally you stop thinking about it. You look away. You literally have to get out of the false environment as much as you can. And just like somehow you are going to create a link. This is how consciousness works. You have an internal world and there's an external world. And whatever you place your awareness on, that's your link and that's your reality. If your link is not with something which is outside of the system, you're always going to be in the system. You never have a rest. And the more you can do that, like I follow cycles in the sky, not because I think it's meaningful, because I know that this is a rhythm which is outside of the system, which I fall underneath. And if I put my awareness to it and my thinking mind, I am tuning my consciousness to the realest, biggest thing I can. Like that's my logic for doing so. But like practices like that to me is how we move out of it. We don't have to solve it. We have to walk away from it and allow the self-corrective nature of our reality to do it. Like whoever created us likes us.
I agree with that, dude. I like that. I mean, I have a big question. Somebody in the chat wanted me to ask you too, but yours is, I'm a Christian, so I focus on, I pray to God or look, I think our creator does like us. And no, I love that, dude. That's a beautiful, and also that's a great, people always say like, what can we do? What can we do to fix this? And that's a great answer because most people are looking for Donald Trump or Elon Musk to save you. But the answer might just be to stop focusing on the problems that we have. Right.
Take care of yourself. Like literally, like in the most basic level, take care of yourself. Like self-care, self-love, like, you know, if that resonates, if that truth resonates, if you can go and understand that, you know, whatever we name it, like there's a creator, like, because we're here, like it's self-evident, self-evident. Yes. And you begin to realize that it's all coming from inside and it's all easy. And he likes us. He wants us to take care of ourselves. And that is like what we put in our minds, how we use our bodies, how we treat each other. But we start by how we treat ourselves.
I love it, dude. Beautiful.
I mean, the truth. Every religion says the same thing. Like in different ways. Truth is truth. And that's how, yes.
So, I love it, Mike. That's beautiful, dude, honestly. So we're going to change gears a little bit. So I watch the one guy in the chat, he always has good questions. So I watch these like short YouTube videos about like DMT and this jester world as demons. Have you ever researched that at all?
We're gonna have a good conversation.
Oh, well, okay. So I want your take. Let me just get his question exactly how he said it. Let me see. He said, I can't. Never mind. That's what we're talking about. He'll just send the question again. But so, what's your take? Like, I thought it was. I watched a Conspiracy R Us. It's like a YouTube video, and he brought up how when you take DMT, a lot of people see these group hallucinations. So you know what I'm talking about. So explain your opinion because I'm butchering it. So,
well, my opinion on what? Just like the general topic and my experience and thoughts on it, or something specific? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things which I think is fascinating, or what has always kind of like been in my mind, is the idea that all of these substances, like whether the drugs the people take, like all of those chemicals are also inside of us, you know, like naturally occurring, or at least we have the raw chemical making material to be able to produce them all. And so that, like, just in a general sense of the idea of the particularly like the pharmaceutical type of substances, and just realizing this internal external world and the mystery of what it is to be human and all that sort of stuff. So like I recognize that. I'm not like, some people get really into a lot of the entheogens, or like that sort of psychedelic experience in order to find God. And that's not exactly my hot button. And I certainly have my thoughts. And the reason why it's not my hot button is because I have my thoughts, but I am experienced. And I do think there is a there, as they say. but this is going to be interesting. So I think it's probably best for me to explain, and I think this might come into some good questions, because you asked me about those lines. You're like, well, do you ever like feel like it's dangerous about crossing those lines and coming close to it? So we're going to do a real deal story.
I love it.
I don't think about myself as a dangerous guy. In fact, I think about myself as really risk adverse. But if I'm being honest with myself, and like there's all this stuff which I do, which a lot of people think is really friggin' dangerous. But I'm like, well, this isn't the dangerous. That's the dangerous stuff. Like that's the nature of being human. So I'll give you an example. I was a master, I still am, but I haven't done it for a year now, is riding my bike with no hands. And I would just ride my bike with no hands. And I'm really good at it. Like, and I have great control, and I ride in places you shouldn't be doing it. And because I take on this risk and I put other people in it, I take a great deal of responsibility. Like so that's a dangerous thing where I'm like, I don't think that's dangerous. Right. There are a lot of other things which I do in my daily practice, which culture would say that is the most dangerous thing in the world. I'm like, I don't think that's dangerous at all. I think that you are conditioning your consciousness to be afraid. Okay. So I kind of do dangerous things, I suppose. 2011, I went down to Peru and I went into an ayahuasca retreat.
No way.
And like everyone who knew me at the time, and I was living like a pretty like regular life. They were like, "You doing what? Yeah. You doing what, dude?" Like it was there've been people going down to Peru and Brazil and South America to have high ayahuasca experiences for at least 30 or 40 years. But I think it was like a little bit more of a cutting edge of where it is now in terms of the collective's understanding of it. But at the time, like people thought I was nuts, and they're like, "That's the most dangerous thing in the world. You're going to do that?" So, okay. So all that being said, when I was down in Peru 10 years ago, I was at the retreat center, and the language used is I was in the medicine 4 nights. So it was like night on, night off, night on, night off, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then since I returned back to the United States, and that was over 10 years ago, I had one other ayahuasca experience. And I've had lots of opportunities, but it wasn't something like, I'm like, I don't need this. I want to respect it, all these sort of things. So that being said, last weekend, try to guess what I did last weekend.
I'm thinking it's going to relate to what we were just talking about.
Yeah. So I had my second post-Peruvian ayahuasca experience. And ayahuasca, like as they explain it, there are all these different ways there, and we could go into like different perspectives of what's actually happening in ayahuasca. But it is, it's said like part of it is this DMT experience, which one has, but there are other elements as well. And I'm probably like maybe an hour into it. And I remember like, I've seemed to have forgotten what the experience is like. And we can ask questions because it is an experience, not so much like what you feel internally as like what the group is doing. Okay. But it is you go through it, you go through the experience, and you are at the very least, like really, really like shaken. You are shaken, and anything that shakens you, you are going to be different. You're going to see things different, maybe just for a little bit of time, maybe for a long time, but like that really does happen. That really does happen. So I'm being vague so that you can ask me questions if you're curious about like what happens, what my thoughts are, and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would love. What was. Is there a thing as like group trip? Like I've taken hallucinogens during. I was a heroin addict, so I know I've heard about like ayahuasca and ibogaine. But is there like this group like what happens when you're or DMT or whatever? Is that a real thing that you guys are like meeting each other on like this astral plane? Or
so I'm going to tell you this. This to me, and I think this is what I'm about to say. In my opinion, is this is the real truth. This is the real truth. Okay. For me, like other people who like have a whole lot more experience than me, they might come to a different conclusion. All right. So when I went down to Peru, I kind of had this perspective that it is the substance. It is a substance that I'm experiencing, and I'm going to go and have this ceremony. But the ceremony is rather, maybe it's it's ritualistic, or maybe
Right.
it's like, part of culture, and like that is malleable. But the real thing, what I'm experiencing, is the substance. And if I can have the substance anywhere, like, it'll be the same. So what I've come to learn through experience is it's the song which the person who leads the ceremony, the songs which they sing. And it's not like a song which it's not like, it's different if you've never heard it in Icaros before. And each curandero has a different Icaros. But the fact that by singing the song alone, they can create the experience, which includes, like, it is literally, like, they're called the best of the best are called maestros, the same word which we use to describe the ultimate conductor, because there's so many elements which are actually happening. I'm not talking about like astral plane, like interpretation. I'm saying, like, you're seeing like people like vomiting and screaming, and like all this stuff is happening, and it's like the song is dictating it. The song is dictating, and they're helpers, and there's like, and I don't know how, like, I thought it was a substance. And when I realized through experience that what I was feeling was completely due to the song and the way it met me, and it met each other person. And it's seemingly, like, to me, that's where the link happens. That is the link which people who have this group experience, and I have experienced that, I have witnessed that, I know that to be true, but it is the song. Now, if you follow and I've only had I think that there may be a variety of structures for the ayahuasca ceremony. My personal experience is only with the Shipibo culture. So this is like an indigenous culture. I don't know if it's just to Peru or different parts of South America, but they've literally shared with the world their private ceremonies for whatever reasons. Like, there's a lot of, there are multiple ways of looking at it. And it is one of the most unexplainable, uncomfortable. It's like, it is both absolute madness, but absolute, like, beautiful artistry at the same time. Like, it's literally like when you said the jester, like, I'm watching this woman in front of, we're in this circle, it's all dark, and she's singing. There may be 10 people there, maybe like 3 of them are like violently purging. Right. And that is like that's what you want. You want, like, there's an element of, like, you are releasing deep within, like, part of, like, within the people who really, really appreciate the ayahuasca ceremony from a spiritual perspective. Like, the medicine goes into every cell of your body and it fixes everything. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that something really, really unexplainable, tangible, like, people really come out. You mentioned, like, heroin addiction. You understand, like, the correspondence between ayahuasca and being able to move off of the addiction. There's something that happens, and I don't like to name it. I don't like to set, like the MAO inhibitor and the DMT, right, and blah blah blah. It's like, all I know is it's a song, and there's something, and something changes, and I'm a different person because of it, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not always like it's
Did you interact with any, like, did you communicate with any, like, so a lot of the people that listen to me, like, in the chat, like, their beliefs would be that you're doing this trip, you're communicating with, again, like, demons or whatever, evil beings that are trying to trick you, like how they say, Lucifer was the bringer of light, but he was a deceiver. Like, did you feel that at all? Did you?
No. No.
Did you communicate, or did you like
No.
interact, or was it more introspective in your experience?
This is my personal opinion. I think all those demons, I think they exist inside of us. So, well, the ayahuasca, they talk about the entities. So this is beyond my pay grade. I don't know. Maybe they're entities. I don't know what an entity is. I don't know what an entity is. Like, I have an idea. Like you mentioned, like, I don't believe in aliens. Like, I understand the idea of aliens. I've never actually seen one. All I know is all the stuff just happens inside, and however we name it, however we deal with it, there's an element of dance and ritual naming that we do externally that has real internal implications. So I am not challenging by any stretch of the imagination that you are, through something like this, you could be going into recesses of the of your inner world, which may have like really like things that aren't good for you.
Dark things, yeah.
Everyone who's like, addicted to something, like, that's a demon. There's something inside of you. There's something inside of you that's making you do something anti-life, whether you want to say like, I've learned this because of like, I was an emotionally neglected child and I needed to fill that void and that pain, which was deep. Like, there's a truth to that. Is that a demon? Is a demon? I don't know. Those things are touched. The ayahuasca experience will definitely touch those in people. And that comes out. For me personally, that did not happen. What mine was, my experiences are, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like observing the entire thing. Like, it's literally, this is what it is. Can I hold my center and witness everything without losing it? That's kind of what it feels like for me.
Well, so
I don't know what's happening. I'm just watching it, and I'm in that. I'm in the moment, and I can't name it, but I'm definitely like not having interactions like a lot of people talk about certain interactions. That's not what my experience is, but it is something very, very meaningful and deep in my subjective way.
How about and I know we'll like finish up and whenever you gotta go, just tell me. But so like I'm trying to word this. I feel like that there's a big push recently from like these power, celebrities or whoever it may be, do this big push for like psychedelics and to experiment like with this other kind of world or experiences. And this could just be my preconceived notions, but I think, there's a reason why they want to push people that way. And it's not to better us, because they've told us to do so many things that are, as I like, your anti-life. So do you ever think that that's, I'm not trying to like argue or anything.
100%. So remember how I said, how I was like, I've gotten lots of invitations to do to go to ayahuasca retreats and I haven't. It's because of that. Like, I'm aware that's happening. Just because that's happening doesn't mean that there's not a truth to ayahuasca. Just because like Karl Marx is associated with other things, which I don't necessarily agree with, doesn't mean that I can't see some truth in some of that stuff.
I love it.
So it's like what you're describing is what I would say is like a degree of discernment and how one navigates their life. And so that's true. That's true. And you can say, well, I'm never going to go because of that, because I am aware that the ball consciousness machine is pushing me in this direction. Like, that's a pretty clear indication I shouldn't be going in that direction. Totally get that. But then there's also something else where like, I know real people who've gone through this and have had like a real experience, which isn't just been like, oh, I went to the fifth dimension and I go and I talk to my spirit animal and it told me that I was the reincarnation of
Cleopatra.
Right? Did you like that, Cleopatra?
Yeah.
So it's like I don't think that if that's someone's thing, that's someone's thing. To me personally, like, I wouldn't do something for that experience. I'm doing something because I want to have an actual result in my actual life, in my actual emotional body, in how I actually carry myself and and my relationships with the world, both like with other people and with like with reality itself. Like, I want something real. So you have to, I approach it with an understanding of that. Like, I think that I know people when they tell me their story, like one of the things which we're taught, don't judge. Yeah, there's a truth to that, but then there's also something like when I can go and see some dude who's made like 100 bad decisions, and then he's like, "Hey, want to hop in the car with me? I got a bottle of tequila, and we're heading down to South Carolina." I'd be like, you know what? I'm probably not going to, I don't want to do that. I'm going to pass on that. Like, there's a little bit, and I have a judgment based upon, the history, which I know. Like, so with a little bit of judgment, I'd say like, I've listened to some people and their experience with it. I'm like, I don't think that's a healthy way to interact. And whether that's because you're going too close with the demons, or whether it's like, you are losing your ability to relate to anything other than your own internal world. And that is a demon. I don't know. So yeah, that's
dude. I really enjoyed this conference because I don't know whether I've just fallen into a certain path, and you're a very well researched person. So I enjoy your opinion because it helps me, break down a little bit of like, that like get away, whether it's, I really enjoy hearing your takes. Cause I love what you said about, there are some truths to good and bad things, or preconceived good or bad things. I mean, that's very powerful.
One of the things which I've noticed about like, which we can learn from like established spiritual practices are like foundational principles in which, to live life, like, how to be righteous. And if that is actually experienced, whatever that, there's the 8 noble paths of Buddhism, or like, all of their traditions, which have like principles in which then to go meet the world, I think if you practice that and you understand that, and you come with that strength which those principles provide, like you can go anywhere. Like that's the whole nature of like, walking in the shadow of the valley of death, or whatever that is. I know I'm butchering it, but like that's what it points. Like when you are quote unquote being human right, and that's what I think these principles are, these truths are. Well, then you can go through those things, and why that is not for the betterment of yourself or the other human beings that you're sharing this time with, and you don't have to worry about, the boogeyman, because you are grounded in something bigger than that.
I love it, dude. I love Michael. How can people find? When are you going to write your book, dude, about the Susquehanna mystery?
At some point, that's been, I think about that. I think about that a lot.
Well, you got one sale here, dude.
So, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, I completed 100 days here. Like that wasn't and we joke. We call this place a halfway house. We call this the asylum, and it's like for people who are moving out of the matrix. Yeah. My next move. This has been as I said, ups and downs in all sorts of ways in my life. And then also it has affected the people who I care about most in my life. And so I'm returning back. To where I was in a different way, in many ways. And I feel like I don't necessarily, crossroads is not the right word, but I'm somewhere different. Like I might be returning somewhere which I'm familiar with, but I'm returning there as with a different perspective, and because of that, I'm not even really certain where I've got ideas really, really floating in my mind, but I'm allowing it to unfold, and I want to integrate, and I need some time to process these 100 days. Like we didn't even talk about what's been going on here, and the people who've been coming here, and like the communities I've been embraced by and I've been included in. Like it has been a lot has happened, but I'm going to go back to where I was. I'm going to go back in the most amazing place. This place has been amazing. The next place is even more amazing. And at some point, I'm going to have to go and write the book. But what I'm first going to do is focus on explaining this system, which I developed for really providing order in the inner world and meeting reality. And that has to do with like creating your own, like the whole calendar system is one of the consciousness foundations of how we experience our lives. We plan things out in the calendar. Calendar is just a whole bunch of like nonsense. It's based upon a truth, but it's nonsensical. And so if you're planning your future in a nonsensical, like arbitrary thing, like that is what you're grounding your life in. And so I've come up with an artistic beauty, like the process of creating your calendar every month. Like that's a thing that coupled with journaling, coupled with how I manage projects and ideas and things which I want to learn. And then also just spontaneous like thoughts and how the overall system, like that's what I'm going to be putting my energy into in my next spot. When that's done, and I want to do those both in person and then also people could download that material. Once that's done, I think is when I'm going to get to the book.
I love it, dude. And so where can like people listen to you and where can they support you? All those good things.
Well, thank you for asking that. So everything's Susquehanna Alchemy. Like, you know, that's usually how it is. YouTube Susquehanna Alchemy is a really good place to be because one, it's free. And I think there's a decent amount of material. And I think everything that's put out there, and a lot of it is really, really good. And even the bad stuff is pretty good, in my opinion. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And a lot of the early stuff, like people are just looking at the later things and go deep in there. If this type of thought, if this type of storytelling, this type of analysis is appealing, like go and spend some time there. Instagram. And, I usually just use Instagram as a way to like let people know when there's a video, if I'm doing something. Mm-hmm. I'm doing more events. We did one in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, which was good. But the support, like I could really benefit from Subscribestar. So you go to Subscribestar and you go to the Susquehanna Alchemy page. And I put up more personal stuff there. I get the impression that people don't even pay attention to what I put up there. It's more so like folks just want to support. And I've been on the receptive end of so much generosity and so much grace. And so that's a really nice way to do it. People send things in the mail to me all the time. Like if you're interested in doing that, send me an email and I'll be like, yeah, you can send me stuff. I love this stuff. So I love that. And then I also do one-on-one work with people. I call it natural astrology. And that's astrology without necessarily the story. It's teaching people to understand why our relationship with the heavens is important, and then how to interact with it in a way which isn't from the Babylonian system, because all of our astrology is straight from Babylon and we live in an astrological society. There's an absolute truth to it. And I teach people how to deconstruct the stuff, which is like you probably don't want to be paying attention to. You want to have discernment with, and you get to the objective truth, why it matters. And in some of the stuff, like what it's known as, and I don't know if this means anything to you, but it's known as esoteric Christianity. And it's like I teach people how to go and apply that in their lives and why it would be beneficial. So if you're interested in that, you go to susquehannaalchemy.com or just send me an email, because I've been very conscious and like trying to move away from technology, but then also realizing I need it in terms of a way of connecting with people. So it's not really working that good. Reach out to me, and if you're interested, and we can find something to do.
Well, I'm gonna buy your video right now when we're done. So if I sounded distracted, I was trying to figure it. So go support Michael, dude. I love your free spirit, man. You are a lot of admiration in that. You're doing what you love. That's so great, man. It's a different world than I live in, but I love it, dude. I love it. So
well, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate all the folks that listened. And here's the most important thing. We are quite literally in this together. We are in this together, and what's right for you has to be right for me, and vice versa. And that's for everyone. Like when we really understand that's the truth, like, that's how we move out of it. It's so easy. It's so easy.
I love it, dude. I love it. So I'll put all your links in the show notes. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for the chat, for all the good questions, and always listening. And we'll talk soon, everybody. Peace.